All right. Diddy, P Diddy, Puff Daddy, Sean Combs Diddy. Takeaways from the verdict in P Diddy's federal sex trafficking trial. Right? This is like the dumbass shit that all the soy dumbass idiots like to, I don't know, like beat Hassan over the head with, all because of like a tweet that he made as like a joke, like from 12 years ago or something. Whatever. He's just like, what? Got like, he's always been like a pretty sussy guy, you know, not a good dude. There was like that one, I think it was in 2018, right? Footage of him like abusing this one sex worker, I think, Cassie Ventura, and I think he's guilty of that shit. But a lot of the other stuff he was allowed to walk on. All right, why don't we just take a look here? Sean Diddy Combs was denied bail on Wednesday after the jury in his federal sex trafficking trial returned its verdict, convicting him on two lesser charges of transportation to engage in prostitution, but clearing the hip hop mogul of the most serious charges. Well, I guess that's a wrap, folks, huh? You know, not really much else to say here besides the bigger stuff. They aren't going to fucking get him on, but that's all about like this sort of like minor shit. So, okay, whatever. The verdict is to some extent a win for Combs, who will avoid the worst case scenario. If he had been convicted of the more serious charges of racketeering, conspiracy, or sex trafficking, so that's the RICO stuff, basically, Combs would have faced up to life in prison. Instead, he faces a maximum sentence of 20 years, though could serve a shorter sentence. He's not getting the full 20. There's no fucking way, right? I think the two things he got charged on, right, is like a combination of like 10 years maximum each. There's no way he's gonna serve the full fucking 10 for either of those. There's no way, right? I mean, you know, he's rich. He's a hip hop mogul. This is more so like I don't know, a highlighting of like the sort of two-tier justice system that exists within the United States of America, where if you're rich, you're able to get away with basically fucking anything. To be honest, so it's unfortunate. It's a bit of a paradox because here we have Sean Combs, who had just been convicted of two federal felonies, said CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. Yeah, Ellie Honig. And for all practical purposes, he has won. He has defeated the Southern District of New York. Prosecutors accused Combs of leading a criminal enterprise made up of some of his closest employees, alleging they used threats, violence, forced labor, bribery, and other crimes to force Cassandra Cassie Ventura and another woman, Jane, to engage in drug-fueled sex acts while male escorts called freak-offs or hotel nights. Male nights? Jesus, why was I saying that? Combs pleaded not guilty to one count of racketeering conspiracy, two counts of sexual trafficking, and two counts of transportation for prostitution. His lawyers argue the sex acts were consensual and merely preferences. Yeah, and this is like the whole problem here with like the US justice system broadly speaking is you can make that fucking argument, and if the prosecution is not able to fucking prove that to the fucking jury in any way shape and form, Diddy will be able to not get fucking charged for any of that and can walk away from that, right? Because you know, guilty, you know, innocent until proven guilty, kind of a deal, and the idea of like, well, you know, underlying kind of reasoning and shit like that like lawyers argue all the fucking time when it comes to you know, cases especially like this, because I know that's what ended up happening with the jury, right? So you know, he can essentially like argue like, okay, well, I mean, you don't have any proof that this is actually what like fucking happened, but do you have like any film or anything like that saying like that these like drug fueled sex parties happened? Because it was always like a rumor with P Diddy in particular, right? Like people knew, but they didn't have any evidence. It's just a kind of a thing that was like that swirled around the industry. It's like, yeah, you know that like P Diddy was like a freak with it, but there was like no able to prove to it to like a jury of peers, so they were not able to say like convict him based off of like enough evidence is essentially what happened. While trying to undermine the hip hop mogul's accusers by contending they were trying to gain a monetary benefit from Combs. And that's like another thing as well they can just say like, they're just trying to do this for the money. It's all the same shit with like Me Too shit, right? This is the exact same line of argumentation. Here are the takeaways from the jury's verdict. Combs can claim some vindication. Combs and his defense team surely hoped he would be acquitted on all counts, but the verdict Wednesday is something of a boon for a star defendant who has seen his reputation diminish in the face of repeated accusations of wrongdoing. His acquittals on racketeering, conspiracy, and 2 counts of sex trafficking are striking when looked within the contents of the defendant's fall from grace. 2 years ago, Ventura filed a lawsuit claiming Combs had raped and physically and emotionally abused her. Yeah, like, the thing is like, it's just like another blow on like a potential like Me Too sort of a case here, right? Because again, another powerful man is going to be able to get away with it because again, it's just like, yeah, content warning, sexual abuse and whatnot, shit like that, whatever. Yeah, like people are going to be able to like people like P Diddy are gonna be able to get away with like shit like this simply due to the fact that he is powerful. He has like a lot of money for like lawyers, and again, he can like throw so much like bullshit into the wind and say like, well, you don't have like any proof or like a video or anything like this to prove that this happened. Like there's like no rape kit or whatever or anything, right? And that's like the fucking problem with shit like this, right? And that makes it like so difficult to prove like anything like any kind of like wrongdoing on the side of like P Diddy, because like honestly, P Diddy is probably the type of guy who would have done something like this. Let's be honest here, he's a very very powerful person within fucking hip hop. But again, if you can't prove it to the fucking jury, it's over, right? Like they're just gonna acquit him on the fucking charges because it's just like, yeah, there's not enough evidence to prove any of this stuff. Combs agreed to settle the lawsuit a day later. His attorney said it was in no way an admission of wrongdoing. Sure. Ventura's lawsuit was only the beginning. More accusers came forward with allegations against Combs, and in March 2024, heavily armed federal agents searched the producers' homes in Los Angeles and Florida. 2 months later, CNN published hotel surveillance footage captured 8 years earlier showing Combs physically assaulting Ventura in an elevator lobby at a Los Angeles hotel. Footage included as part of the prosecution's case for sex trafficking as to Ventura. So I believe that this, like, in terms of the minor sort of cases, that's what did him in, basically, because they can't really do anything about that. Can't disprove this fucking, like, surveillance footage. So he was fucking cooked there. Like, 1000%. But, like, you can throw so much fucking doubt into the wind about like, oh, was the actual purpose for this for like sex trafficking, drug-fueled parties as is being alleged here? Well, you don't have any evidence to say that, and you can make that argument to a jury, and it's just like, well, not enough evidence has been presented by the prosecution so we can acquit P. Diddy of this shit. Now, while the verdict is mixed, Combs can claim some vindication on being cleared of the most serious charges. Regardless of what anyone thinks of Sean Combs, the simple fact is, as of right now, in the eyes of the law, he has not been convicted of a crime of violence, said CNN legal analyst Elliot Williams. He has not been convicted of the far more serious, life-eligible crimes that he was charged with. Prosecutor's RICO case comes up short. The verdict shows prosecutors failed to prove racketeering conspiracy. And while the jury's reasoning is not known, experts told CNN prior to deliberations that prosecutors' greatest challenge would be securing a conviction on this charge. That jurors found Combs not guilty shows that they were unconvinced, either of the existence of a so-called enterprise, a key piece of any racketeering case, or that he and others committed the underlying crimes that would support a conviction. Right, like, yeah, basically the thing that I've been saying. There's, like, an idea that P. Diddy did, like, some sussy stuff, but there's no, like, tangible evidence. There's no paper trail to be able to follow, right? It's just, like, you kind of know. There's, like, rumors about it, right? That I've, like, swirled around since, like, I don't know, like, decades ago at this point. But there's, like, nothing in order to be able to, like, prove it sort of, like, tangibly. The charge comes from the Racketeer Influence and Corruption Organizations Act, or RICO, which was passed by Congress in 1970 to prosecute organized crime. Racketeering is not a single specific crime, but a framework for prosecuting many different crimes. In a RICO case, these are called predicate acts. In Combs' case, prosecutors specifically argued the defendant and members of his inner circle had engaged in crimes involving kidnapping, arson, forced labor, bribery, and sex trafficking. To convict, jurors would have needed to find Combs and at least one other person committed at least 2 predicate acts within a 10-year window. The use of RICO in Combs' case, while not entirely novel, was unusual in that he was charged alone. Yeah, that's the fucking issue here. A lot of what happens in U.S. law significantly cares about precedent. Like, precedent is basically fucking king. It's really difficult to establish, like, I don't know, sort of like new patterns and trends in terms of like U.S. justice and fucking law. So again, a lot of like what the defendants can do is sort of like throw a lot of doubt into the fucking wind, saying like, oh, it's a little weird that like my defendant here is sort of like being the only one that's like being prosecuted here. Like normally with like most RICO stuff, there's like multiple people that are getting sort of, you know, sort of prosecuted here again. So it's a little fucking weird. And you know they can like again, because like generally speaking, like the main thing here is like if the prosecution doesn't have enough evidence, it makes it a lot easier for the defense to be like what do you mean here? Like what you're just alleging is like complete fucking nonsense, right? Like you don't have any basis or evidence for any of this stuff, right? That's like the main issue. Jurors did not hear direct testimony from many of the people who had been members of the alleged enterprise, namely his closest employees, like his chief of staff or some of his security guards. And legal analysts have wondered whether the evidence presented at trial had clearly linked Combs' alleged criminal acts to an enterprise. In their closing argument, the government offered jurors a roadmap outlining the charge, the elements needed to prove it, and the parts of their case that would support a conviction. Still, the argument did not persuade jurors. Mixed verdicts on charges tied to freak-offs and hotel nights. Combs' acquittal on sex trafficking charges is a big blow to the prosecutors for the Southern District of New York and to his accusers, Ventura and a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane, each of whom spent days testifying, recounting years of abuse they said they suffered from Combs. But again, this is like the main problem with like a lot of Me Too cases. If there's not enough like I don't know evidence in order to be able to like prove these things, all you can operate off of is a lot of circumstantial stuff, which isn't enough to really like deem someone as fucking guilty in terms of cases like this. It's like the same shit with like Israel Palestine, for example, right? With like the rapes that Hamas more than likely did. Again, like the UN said themselves that Hamas more than likely did rape people on October 7th. That is without a doubt. The problem is that we don't have the sort of like evidence in order to be able to prove that, and we can only operate based off of circumstantial fucking evidence to, well, bring such a fucking verdict because of the fact that Israel has made it harder for the UN in order to be able to, well, do those particular fucking investigations. So again, they have to operate off of circumstantial evidence. That's what that fucking shit means. But, you know, a sort of similar case, it can happen here. And that can be, like, convincing to, like, a jury or not. It's, you know, complete shit show. While prosecutors accused Combs of sex trafficking as a predicate act under the umbrella of racketeering conspiracy, they also charged him with separate counts of sex trafficking, one each for Ventura and Jane. To prove sex trafficking, prosecutors need to prove Combs compelled the women to participate in commercial sex acts through force, fraud, or coercion. And jurors were presented with a myriad of examples of alleged physical violence and financial control. Regarding Ventura, prosecutors contended physical force was illustrated in one instance by the Intercontinental Hotel surveillance footage showing Combs assaulting Ventura in 2016, first published by CNN. Yeah, like there's like that footage video. We can like find that shit, right? Testimony by both women suggested some level of financial professional control. Ventura signed to Combs' record label at just 19, and prosecutors argued he controlled her career. Jane, meanwhile, testified she and Combs entered into a love contract where he agreed to pay her $10,000 rent, but that he threatened to cut her off financially if she stopped participating in hotel nights. Oh, okay. Is there no like financial paper trail for stuff like this? I feel like there's definitely got to be a way to be able to fucking prove this. Like show like a wire of the fucking money, for example, right? Like this could potentially be an easy sort of like slam dunk case. But does she not have the fucking records or anything like that? Like yeah, like unfortunate, unlucky because that this wasn't convincing enough to like a potential jury. Like she must have just not had any of the fucking evidence. Maybe it's like you could like because you could prove the wiring of the $10,000, right? That's probably not very difficult. You can get like bank statements and stuff like that, right? Totally, for sure. But like I don't know, the love contract stuff. I mean, that's like technically something that's probably a lot more difficult to sort of prove, right? But this shit like this should be like a slam dunk, right? Combs' attorneys had acknowledged physical abuse, but argued throughout the trial that domestic violence did not amount to sex trafficking. I mean, technically speaking, they are correct there, right? Domestic violence does not mean you are sex trafficking someone, right? Like, it is correlative, right? Certainly can be, but it is not sort of like concrete evidence to say that there was someone who's being sex trafficked in that instance, right? Like in Andrew Tate's case, for example. Like, there was very clear and obvious evidence that Andrew Tate was being coercive and was doing fraudulent things to the women that he was sex trafficking, which is why he got caught with fucking sex trafficking. And he was also domestically abusive to the women that he had in his sort of, I don't know, tenure, care. I guess we can use those words in particular. Sure, whatever. But, like, just domestic violence alone, that does not necessarily amount to sex trafficking. Now, this can definitely admit to amount to sex trafficking. This $10,000 sort of rent. But, I mean, technically speaking, then, like, I guess Diddy's lawyers could fucking argue that this is, like, a sort of, like, sugar baby kind of a deal that Diddy decided to enter within, I guess by the term of like love contract. Again, it's like really, it's a lot easier for like the defendant in this case to be able to sort of do this without like some form of like hardcore tangible fucking evidence, right? And that's like the main fucking issue here, like, and why it's like really difficult for like Me Too stuff to be fucking prosecuted very, very often, because you can only operate off of, like, circumstantial evidence, for example. That's the main fucking issue, right? Prosecutors also told the jury they weren't suggesting every freak-off and hotel night were instances of sex trafficking. Both Ventura and Jane testified they were willing to try the sexual encounters in the beginning of their relationships with Combs. The jury's verdict suggests prosecutors did not provide the elements needed to convict, like the force, fraud, and coercion. Yeah, they just didn't have the fucking evidence. Although, like, honestly, like, this could be fucking coercive here, right? The $10,000 rent? That could certainly be an element that sort of can argue in the point of, like, coercion for fucking potential sex trafficking. But they did not have any wires or statements or anything? Like, nothing? Like, that's fucking unfortunate, then. My heart in this moment is going out to Casey, said Dream Hampton, the executive producer of Surviving R. Kelly. I cannot imagine what she's feeling. I'm afraid that with Puff walking, the more serious charges that he's, not only him, the whole entire discourse. I just wonder what we're going to learn from this, Hampton added. Combs was convicted, however, on 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution, each of which pertained to Ventura and Jane and the men Combs paid to have sex with them. Those charges were more straightforward than the other, and prosecutors merely needed to prove that the people crossed state lines to engage in prostitution. Yeah, like, that's, like, way, way fucking easier to prove, right? Because you can just get, like, I don't know, like, particular, like, records of, like, people who went into, like, a fucking hotel room, right? Because you can know where their location is from based off of, like, identifiers that they use in order to go to the fucking hotel rooms. Yeah, that's, like, That's more of like an easy sort of slam dunk. I'm still surprised about the $10,000 rent stuff. Like, this can certainly present like an element of fucking coercion here, to be honest. But yeah, it's just fucking unfortunate, to be honest, that it wasn't enough. Both women testified to having freak-offs or hotel nights in a variety of locales, and prosecutors presented documents that bolstered that testimony, including flight records, American Express charges, and hotel invoices for Combs' former girlfriends and the men. Huh, interesting. That wasn't enough? Crazy. I guess it really needed to be the wire for like the $10,000 rent. I'm surprised still that they must have had that provided in the evidence. Like, that's like the one thing that I have like a biggest question about, to be honest. What was clearer throughout this trial was acts of prostitution that were supported by airplane records, payments, and so on. Information that would be that would just be hard to deny. Yeah, that's a good point, Alex. Yeah, juries can't be pieces of shit too. That's entirely true. Like, it could have been a bunch of like P Diddy fans or some shit, and they could have just been like, well, I don't know if this is like necessarily enough, right? Like, I don't know. Said Williams. There were sex acts, no one disputes that, and they were paid for, and there's a paper trail linking the defendant to them. That was more straightforward for the prosecution to prove compared to some of the other things. Prior to trial, Combs' defense unsuccessfully lobbied for the transportation to engage in prostitution charges, which stem from the Mann Act, to be dismissed, citing the statute's racist origins. I don't know. I understand the play here. That's gonna be a fucking tough one. I'm gonna be honest here. Attorneys for Combs have previously accused the government of racism, allegations the government denied. I don't think this is, listen. Okay, we're gonna be a little anti-woke. Okay, we're gonna be dark woke here. Okay, listen. Can't just fucking throw racism at fucking everything, okay? Listen, in this particular case, I don't fucking think so. I don't think it's about fucking racism for this one, okay? Like, there's evidence of, like, and, like, paper trails and stuff of, like, P. Diddy fucking doing this shit and organizing this fucking shit. So, like, yeah, I don't think so. They got the fucking hotel records and everything, Doug Wigdor, Ventura's attorney, acknowledged Wednesday's verdict was not the exact outcome we wanted in an interview with CNN. Well, that's for sure. Cassie prompted this investigation, and now Sean Combs stands before the court as a convicted felon of 2 federal crimes. He faces significant incarceration, he said. Combs' legal troubles are far from over. While the verdict marks the beginning of the end of one legal chapter for Combs, he still faces legal trouble. Most immediately, he'll face sentencing for the prostitution charges for which he was convicted Wednesday. Each carries up to 10 years, but CNN legal analysts indicated it's possible he serves less. More than likely, right? The defense will probably argue that he should get less because of, I don't know, like, good behavior or some shit, whatever. Could be a bunch of fucking nonsense. Certainly very few people are ever sentenced to the top of the statutory maximum, Williams said. So we should get the 10-year or 20-year figure out of our heads. But he will go to jail for some time. Sentencing will be scheduled at a later date. Judge Arun Subramanian said in court Wednesday he denied Combs' bail when it wasn't mandatory before the trial, and sees no reason to reach the opposite conclusion now. Yeah, listen. Yeah, it's actually, this is secretly Arun Ano. Obviously, he's the judge in the P Diddy case. The judge quoted the defense at different instances when Combs' lawyers acknowledged his violence towards his former girlfriends. At trial, the defense conceded the defendant's violence in personal relationships, saying it happened in relation to Cassie Ventura and Jane. Subramanian said. Subramanian also said there was also violence and illegal conduct after the searches on Combs' homes when he was aware he was under investigation. This highlights a disregard for the rule of law and a propensity of violence, he said. Prosecutor Maureen Comey said the judge is correct in his decision to keep Combs in detention, saying the music mogul is an extremely violent man with an extraordinarily dangerous temper who has shown no remorse and no regret for his multiple victims. I mean, normally speaking, like, this line of thought would be racist. But, like, in the case of P Diddy, I don't know. We've seen the fucking hotel lobby footage, right? We've seen people have seen it before, right? I've also seen that shit before. There seems like he's kind of violent. Sometimes you gotta call a spade, Subramanian had asked the defense attorneys and prosecutors to submit letters on their positions about the possibility of releasing Combs ahead of the bail hearing. Mr. Combs has been given his life by this jury, defense attorney Mark Agnifilo? Sure, said in court earlier this morning as he argued for the judge to allow his client to return home. Oh, that's cool. Well, I guess he's going to walk free. Prosecutors in their letter, or they're going to try to make him walk free. Whatever. Prosecutors in their letter to the judge said Combs faces a maximum range of 51 to 63 months in prison, according to their preliminary calculation, but it may be higher at sentencing. The possibility of a substantial sentence such as this is a significant factor in asserting the risk of flight, the letter says. Earlier, an attorney for central witness Ventura had requested the court keep Combs detained until he is sentenced on the transportation to engage in prostitution charges. Ms. Ventura believes that Mr. Combs is likely to pose a danger to the victims who testified in this case, including herself, as well as to the community. Ventura's attorney, Wigdor, wrote in a letter. At the bail hearing, Agnifilo said the jury had acquitted Combs of the most serious charges and that Combs has been a model prisoner since he was detained, and he has done everything his lawyers asked of him. Right, yeah, which is going to look pretty good to the fucking judge, for example. Talking about, like, how he's a model prisoner and all that fucking bullshit. This is a very, very common thing to happen. He came here, he faced the court, he's been decent with the court each and every day, and he just deserves the chance, Agnifilo said. Tene Garagos, another one of Combs' attorneys, made comments outside the New York courthouse, thanking the jury for putting such great care into this case. I also have been saying this since the beginning of this case. Sean Combs has not sexually assaulted anyone. I'm pressing X to doubt on that one. I've been saying this for months, Garagos said. We've said it with each lawsuit that came out, and to date, that's how was proven untrue. Yeah, the typical, like, evangelist, as expected, this constantly happens to fucking powerful people who get, like, acquitted of, like, the worst things possible, right? Yeah, same thing in, like, Me Too cases as well. This is a thing that happens all the time. It's a lot easier for very powerful people to walk off because they just have the power in order to be able to get that. And, like, star power, like, media sort of ability, shit like that. Blah, 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 blah. The attorney added he has not sexually assaulted anybody, certainly hasn't sex trafficked anybody, and the jury found that today. Well, it's more so there just hasn't been enough evidence to suggest that he hasn't done that, right? Combs still faces a raft of civil lawsuits. Nearly 70 have been filed so far, with several as recent as last week, accusing Combs of further wrongdoing, including sexual assault. Combs has denied all the allegations. Notably, civil claims carry a lower burden of proof. In the criminal trial... Oh, right, of course. Because these are federal cases, which may have a higher standard of proof that is needed, right? Yeah. In the criminal... So he could potentially get cooked civilly, but federally, he's probably going to be... Like, it's not going to be that bad for him, kind of a deal. In the criminal trial, jurors need to find Combs guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But in a civil case, the proof only needs to meet what's called a preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not. And yeah, it's been updated with several developments. So I guess that's like the sort of main thing. Obviously, like, P Diddy still has a bunch of civil lawsuits against him, right? Like, what are some of the civil lawsuits? Flurry of civil cases? Like, What do we got here? Client's perspective, 400 new potential civil claimants. Jesus. 37 fucking people are bringing 400 potential civil claims against him. Damn, that's fucking crazy. Influx of phone calls throughout call center throughout his company, which based in Billings, Montana. Long before allegations began mounting on Combs, the center used to sift through callers' grievances about legal issues ranging from natural disaster recovery to sexual assault claims, assisting law firms while processing complaints for litigation by marketing the hotline as an avenue through which firms can obtain potential clients. According to the company's website, Reciprocity employs more than 150 legal intake professionals, and the company's services have been retained for over 500 law firms in the U.S. Damn. So, yeah, what? I guess in terms of the civil cases, yeah, P. Diddy ain't exactly out of it yet, but in terms of the federal stuff, well, the worst possible stuff, he gets to dodge a bullet basically on that one. And there's more so like, I don't know, like I know a lot of people did like the fucking Boondocks comparison of like black people like celebrating like R. Kelly being released from prison or some shit, and it's like a meme, and people are doing the whole like, yeah, oh, this is totally like a connection, dude. Yeah. Like the Boondocks totally like predicted that this would happen. I always find those like really annoying, but it's just like it's kind of crazy that there was a bunch of P. Diddy fans celebrating his not guilty verdict, even though he was found guilty on like two of the more minor charges of transportation and prostitution, because that was like proven pretty much without a shadow of a doubt. The two other things, again, a lot more difficult to fucking allege, right? Which would have basically completely cooked him, but like, it's whatever. Yeah, it's this is like this shit's like pretty dumb. They were like doing dances and shit like that outside of the fucking goddamn courthouse in celebration for this, even though like honestly like he's not out of it yet. P. Diddy is obviously like a piece of shit. He's a very powerful man who has like coerced people to do like terrible things for the express purpose of like, I don't know, his own hedonism, more or less. We all know the meme, like it happened during the Me Too era and stuff like that. But I mean, mostly it's like shows pretty like threadbare how it's a lot easier for like more powerful people to be able to, well, get away with like potentially like heinous crimes. Now it's not obviously over yet. Like I think he might be cooked civilly more, but the punishment there is not going to be obviously as severe in terms of like the civil offenses. But there's a lot of them though, like 400 different fucking civil cases. That's going to be, a complete shit show for, I don't know, P. Diddy to have to go through and deal with. But yeah, I mean, more or less at this point, it's just like a sort of like a showcase of like how like the two-tiered justice system more or less works in favor of the fucking rich. Obviously, in terms of race, it's also like really, really bad. But that's like we're talking about a completely different thing. We're talking about like, people who have a lot more money, power, and resources, how they can a lot more easily throw doubt into the wind of a lot of different like particular allegations and like sort of cases, because of the fact that they can easily afford to do stuff like that, and they have like the sort of like star power and acumen in order to be able to do that, and like sort of like a public ingratiation as a result. And I mean, that certainly seems to be part of the case for fucking P. Diddy at this point. Like he was able to escape a lot more of the severe stuff. Of course, like there's still the civil stuff, but that's going to be a complete like different shit show in itself. So I guess for the time being, like the two-tier justice system, as always, for the fucking United States of America, being laid out threadbare as always. It's a lot easier for those who are rich in order to be able to get acquitted, in order to be able to get like not guilty charges and stuff like that. And it's a lot of like double standard ass bullshit as always. You hate to fucking see it as always. You always hate to fucking see it, to be honest.